This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the ISIS connection. Israeli leaders see ISIS inspiration behind Palestinian attacks. And Islamic extremism and the internet. How radicals are using social media to spur young people to violence. Plus, explaining the history of Palestinian violence against Israel. And how to stand with Israel in the time of trouble. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl, filling in for Chris Mitchell. We're coming to you from the old city of Jerusalem. Behind me is the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. Palestinians continued their third week of terror attacks against Israel. Now, the most vicious group in the Middle East is stirring up more violence. ISIS released a video encouraging Palestinians to carry out more terror attacks. Chris Mitchell has that story.
The recent wave of terrorism in Israel shows signs of copying ISIS tactics, like their beheading videos. That's what Israeli Infrastructure Minister Yuval Steinitz told CBN News.
The fact that they are using knives, and coming to people's neck, people trying to cut them or to behead them, I'm confident that at least some of those terrorists were not just indoctrinated, but inspired also from ISIS.
The ISIS production shows Israelis being murdered in terror attacks, praying and crying and being buried. Some of the video is from security cameras of recent attacks. It urges Palestinians to use knives, explosives, and poison to kill Israelis. It also shows ISIS clips of murdering individuals. Former Israeli Shin Bet Secret Service official Lior Ackerman said ISIS doesn't exist here as an organization in the Palestinian areas, but they would if they could.
They are trying to take an advantage on what happens here. They will do any effort to send terrorists inside and to put a stamp that ISIS entered here.
Ackerman told CBN News that social media has paved the way.
I think that because of the social networks, the easy access to sites of ISIS abroad, every Palestinian who opens a computer can obviously go and say that he now belongs to ISIS, to learn what to do and to take further instructions to execute some terror attacks in Israel.
ISIS has been calling for the past year and a half at least for Western Muslims in particular to rise up and kind of become these one-man jihads.
Many of the Palestinians who are carrying out the recent terror attacks seem to be acting on their own. CBN News terrorism analyst Eric Steckelbeck says the lone wolf nature of the attackers is also a sign of the ISIS influence.
Now what we're seeing in Jerusalem, in Hebron, are Palestinians, basically an army of lone wolves carrying out just random, spur of the moment in some cases, stabbing and shooting and rock throwing and terror attacks.
Rioting Palestinians also set fire to the tomb of the biblical patriarch Joseph in Nablus. Palestinians have attacked holy sites for years, long before ISIS arose. And Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas condemned that attack. But Steckelbeck said it's just like what ISIS does.
They want to erase any signs of biblical history or Christianity or Judaism, the Old Testament, the New Testament. They want to erase them and eradicate them from the face of the earth and from the memory of the earth.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Israel arrested a prominent Hamas leader, accusing him of fomenting violence. It comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says radicals are using social media to inspire young people to carry out terror attacks.
It didn't take long for Hamas to come out with a video reenactment of a terror stabbing and shooting attack on an Israeli bus. 2 Israelis were murdered in that attack, and the terrorists were killed. It's this kind of combination between Islamic extremism and the internet that's fueling the current wave of violence, Netanyahu says.
It's Osama bin Laden meets Mark Zuckerberg. It's incitement on social media networks. This is what is motivating the acts of murder.
Netanyahu says that assessment comes from investigation of terrorists.
We investigated the terrorists, those who are still alive. We went to the Facebook pages of those who were killed during their attempted murders. And we see clearly there is very direct incitement, and this is what motivates these acts of murder.
In an interview aired on official Palestinian Authority television, senior Fatah official Jibril Rajoub glorifies terrorists.
These are individual acts of heroism, and I am proud of them and congratulate all those who carried them out.
Referring to one terrorist who murdered 2 Israelis on a Jerusalem bus, Rajoub said,
"That hero who wrote a Facebook post that could be a document worthy to be taught in schools about the meaning of martyrdom."
On his Facebook page, Baha Aliyan scorned what he called real media and chastised Palestinian leaders as well as fellow Palestinians for a lack of patriotism. Israel released a document of some of the recent cases, including a Facebook post from an advisor to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. In it, Sultan Abu el-Ainin praises the murderer from the Beersheba bus station attack, saying he receives a Medal of Honor as a martyr. Other posts show various cartoons encouraging knife attacks. According to an expert at the Institute for National Security Studies, about a third of Palestinians in Jerusalem and the West Bank are active on social media. That spells trouble when it's encouraging terrorism. Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
The recent wave of violence has many Israelis wondering if a third intifada could be on the way. Now, while Israelis understand what intifada means, many around the world may not. CBN's Ephraim Graham breaks it down for us so we'll understand the situation better and know how we should be praying.
Intifada is an Arabic word for uprising. It's been used to describe revolts by Palestinians living in Israel. The first Intifada happened in the 80s and early 90s. The second took place from 2000 to 2004. It is important to know, these uprisings were not spontaneous. Each happened as a result of Palestinian leadership teaching its people to hate the Jews. This strategy is then spread through the education system and the media. This latest violence has been labeled by some as the third Intifada. It began last month when Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas said the Jews' dirty feet shouldn't go on the Temple Mount, the holy site sacred to Jews and also Muslims. Almost each uprising begins after Palestinian leaders spread the rumor Jews are going to ban Muslims from the Temple Mount. While this is completely untrue, it achieves the desired result of unrest. So, what's new this time around? The advent of social media.
It's like all of a sudden we went just, you have an explosion, so to speak, of stabbings in Israel. And that's not by accident.
Not only are calls to violence being spread online, so is misinformation. Take a look at these online posts like this with Israeli officers pointing guns toward a Palestinian kid, a cartoon that can be interpreted, "May God fill the hearts of Jews with fear." As you can imagine, this is only one side of the story. You're not being told the story of Palestinians armed with guns and knives and taking after and trying to attack Israeli police officers. So failing to tell the full story, that could certainly lead to more violence. Now, if you'd like to learn more about this conflict and what is happening in Israel, simply log on to cbnnews.com and click on the Inside Israel tab. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Coming up, UNESCO declares Jewish biblical sites Islamic. Welcome back. A United Nations body declared 2 Jewish biblical holy sites to be Islamic. It also accused Israel of what it called aggression against the Palestinians on the Temple Mount.
Israel says UNESCO is helping Palestinians to rewrite biblical history and transform the Israeli-Palestinian conflict into a religious one.
UNESCO has become an instrument in the hands of the Arabs and the Palestinians.
The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization passed a resolution saying the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron and Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem are an integral part of Palestine. Earlier, they claimed both as mosques. Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesman Emmanuel Nachshon told CBN News the declaration helps Palestinians promote their political narrative.
It is an attempt by the Arab side and by the Palestinians to change history, to pretend as if those places which are holy places for Judaism, which have been holy places for Judaism for thousands of years, are actually Palestinian or Muslim holy places.
Historical evidence indicates that the biblical forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were buried in the cave of the patriarchs, along with their wives. The site of Rachel's tomb is believed to be the burial place of the biblical matriarch Rachel, the favored wife of Jacob. The resolution stopped short of including the western wall as part of the Al-Aqsa compound, as Palestinians had hoped. It would have renamed the plaza Al-Barak after Muhammad's winged horse.
Even in such an organization as UNESCO, which has become a puppet in the hands of the Palestinians, there is a limit to what you can do. But I have no doubt that they will try again.
The resolution also accused Israel of aggression on the Temple Mount. Yet Palestinians have repeatedly attacked police and visitors to the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism. The current wave of terrorism is a reaction to what they say are Israeli attempts to change the status quo. Israel denies any changes there.
This Palestinian initiative is certainly related to what we live here on the ground. Palestinian violence, Palestinian incitement, and also the attempt to transform a conflict into a religious conflict.
Earlier, Palestinians set fire to the tomb of the biblical patriarch Joseph. Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas condemned that arson attack, but Nachshon says it's a sign of what would happen if Palestinians were in charge.
The Palestinian arson of Joseph's tomb demonstrates very clearly what would be the fate of Jewish holy sites if they were under Palestinian control.
Dr. Cornelius Becker from Regent University said Christians should care because it's their history too.
The history of Israel is about God's choice. God chose Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph here, the very tomb that's now been set on fire. And so we feel a kinship with Israel because it's about God's choice and it's our history. Jesus was a Jew, Paul was a Jew, the early church were all Jewish.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
The gray dome behind me is the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. It's one of the most recognized sites in Islam, and as we've seen from the recent wave of terrorism, even a rumor about Israel threatening the site can send Muslims here into a frenzy. It's a dishonest tactic, and one that's aimed at not only undermining Israel, but also Judeo-Christian values.
It's one of the most holy and contested pieces of real estate on earth, the Temple Mount. For decades, Islamic leaders have incited Muslims to violence by telling them that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is in danger. First, they claim that the Israelis were undermining its foundations to make it collapse. Now they also say it's a threat even for Jews to pray on the sacred plateau.
Extreme movements believe that Israel is planning to build the third temple and to destroy their holy shrine.
Known in Arabic as the Haram al-Sharif, or Noble Sanctuary, it's the place where two consecutive Jewish temples once stood. The second was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. Now, Muslim mosques occupy the site. The Golden Dome of the Rock to my right is the most identifiable Muslim shrine on the Temple Mount. But it's the gray-domed Al-Aqsa Mosque to my left that Muslims consider the third holiest site in Islam. They believe that Muhammad took a famous night ride from Mecca to Al-Aqsa on his winged horse, Al-Barak. Al-Aqsa was first built in 705 AD. In Muslim theology, the site precedes the Jews and goes back to creation.
You know, Adam, when he descended from the heaven, he came here and he was pray here.
No different between Sulaiman and King David and all the prophets is all the same. They're all been in Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Today, the entire plateau is referred to as Al-Aqsa. Nadav Shragai wrote the Al-Aqsa is in danger libel, The History of a Lie. He says when Muslim leaders want to unite the masses, they claim it's in danger.
The match that ignites the people and brings them to the streets and causes violence is this libel. Al-Aqsa is in danger, and this is baseless.
Archaeologist Dr. Gabriel Barkai says there have been excavations near the Temple Mount, but never under it.
One of the cornerstones of Western civilization was never touched by the spade of the archaeologist.
Barkai says it was Muslims, not Jews, who began digging in an attempt to rewrite history.
Since the 90s, there were many destructive diggings going on in the Temple Mount, which were not for archaeological purposes, but the contrary, for destroying archaeological data.
Around 2000, the Islamic religious authorities dug up thousands of years of history with bulldozers from under the Temple Mount to make room for a giant mosque. Barkai headed an operation to save artifacts from the discarded material. Years later, archaeologists and volunteers still sift through the debris. According to Shragai, then Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini started the libel against Israel in the 1930s. He accused the Jews of wanting to collapse the mosques on the Temple Mount. That led to Muslim rioting and murder of the Jews, just the first of many incidents. Islamic expert Dr. Yitzhak Reiter says the tactic hasn't lost its potency.
They really believe in what they think. The Al-Aqsa is in danger as long as Israel is controlling the eastern part of East Jerusalem.
In 1969, the Muslim world blamed Israel for the arson attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque by a visiting Australian Christian. That lie continues today. More trouble in 1996. The worst Israeli-Palestinian violence in 30 years broke out when Israel opened an exit for visitors to the Western Wall tunnels half a mile from Al-Aqsa. And in 2004, rain, snow, and a minor earthquake toppled the entrance ramp to the Temple Mount. That provoked an international Islamic uproar when Israel tried to rebuild it. We asked Muslims in Jerusalem what they think.
It's in danger. To destroy him, to take the place, it's in danger.
They are digging underneath it and digging and digging, and they don't find anything.
God will save it.
Experts say it's important the West takes notice now, because millions of Muslims believe the lie is true. They say if it brought violence in the past, it will do so in the future. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem's Old City.
Coming up, standing with Israel in its time of trouble. Welcome back. Laurie Cardozo Moore is president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. It's a group aimed at educating Christians on their biblical responsibility to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. Moore spoke with Chris Mitchell about how Christians can help in tough times.
Laurie Cardozo Moore, it's great to be with you here in Jerusalem.
Chris, it's been a while, but it's great to be back.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the program.
You're here in Jerusalem at a very critical time with a number of terror attacks going on. How would you describe the mood, the atmosphere, and your own feelings to people who are back in the United States?
There's a heightened amount of tension here this time. And, people, in fact, Stan and I were having dinner the other night, Saturday night after Shabbat. Normally on any given Saturday night, the streets would be bustling, people would be out shopping or having dinner. We were the only ones in the restaurant, and we called the waiter over and asked him, why isn't anybody here? He said people are afraid. It's been quite disturbing to see what is happening, just randomly going on. And the mood is one of trepidation. People are trying to go about their day and work. Here is a world who accuses these people who are constantly trying to create, to make our lives better, the world's lives better, whether it's through technology, whether it's through medicine, education, security. But they're being accused of being violent and oppressing the Palestinians or the Arabs who live here. It's not part of their nature. It's not part of their psyche or their makeup.
Your documentary that you have right now, what do you hope to accomplish through that, and what do you want to communicate to people?
Our goal with this next documentary film is to target the millennial generation. As you well know, Chris, that Christians are being targeted now with this pro-Palestinian propaganda. We see what's happening with Christ at the Checkpoint and the Sabeel Foundation and the narrative that is coming out. And unfortunately, there are many Christians, especially young Christians, who are falling prey. We're forgetting that there is a biblical story And there is a biblical worldview that we all should remember when we're looking at the circumstances. It's our goal with this film to show the world that the very accusations of apartheid, the very accusations of oppression of Arabs, the persecuting of Christians is not true. It's a fallacy, it's a lie, and that is the most important thing we as Christians need to remember, that God has a plan for this people, and He will bless those who bless Israel, and He will curse those who curse Israel.
How can Christians support Israel, pray for Israel, stand with Israel?
Well, first and foremost is we do need to pray for Israel, but one of the things that we're calling our listeners, our viewers, to do is to contact our elected officials. It is our funding, our tax dollars, that are going to help fund Abbas's government, Fatah. And Mahmoud Abbas, back on September 16th, was inciting this hatred. He was inciting Arabs to start launching attacks. And of course, we shouldn't be a bit surprised after Abbas spoke at the United Nations that, of course, this, what some people are calling the third intifada, or someone else mentioned it's the third jihad, has erupted. The way we respond is by contacting our elected officials. Even going to the Knesset website and sending emails of encouragement to the Israeli leaders as they're trying to navigate through this very difficult time.
Thanks for being with us, Laurie.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here again.
Up next, the animated series that's teaching Middle East kids about the Bible. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Finally this week, CBN is using Superbook to reach refugee children in the Middle East. The United Nations estimates there are over 4 million Syrian and Iraqi refugees. Recently, CBN held events in a refugee camp using Superbook. More than 300 children enjoyed watching the In the Beginning episode, memorizing scripture, playing games, and listening to a lesson from Superbook's new curriculum. Superbook's new Church Edition curriculum is an elementary Bible study program that provides spiritual, biblical, and faith guidance to children. That's it for this edition. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. Remember that the God who's watching over Israel and you and me never slumbers nor sleeps. I'm Julie Stahl. We'll see you next week on Jerusalem Dateline.